Everybody that's new. If you're a new participant this week, if you didn't participate last week, welcome to the call. If you were here last week, then you definitely got the spiel about what this meeting is all about. But this meeting is specific for agency support persons. And it is meant to be an interactive meeting where I can share some information and updates, but you can also raise new issues and questions. We can't do a lot of screen sharing because it is a large group, mixed group, so we can't screen share with like personal information and things like that. But the Q&A icon is available to you. So if you have questions, please go ahead and find your Q&A icon in your Zoom menu. It might be hidden under the more option, the three dot ellipses. But open that up and you can type questions into the Q&A throughout the call. And also, I should be able to get through my updates before the end of the hour, and we can certainly just open up the floor for answering some of those questions and or people chiming in as needed. So the first thing that I wanted to start with is just, and I think I shared this last week, but I just want to share it one more time, is a reminder for all agency support people. The Microsoft Teams channels are still there and the process is still in place where if end users are struggling to find the answers to their own questions, they should be escalating those up to you. Again, you're not expected to be any sort of an expert of the system, but rather if you don't know what the answer to their question is, or you don't know how to help them find the answer to their question, that you would escalate it through that Microsoft Teams channel. And we do want to remind everybody that if you're reporting an issue through the Teams channel, if it's a brand new issue, you should start a brand new post for it. If you're having the same issue as another organization that's already reported in a post, you can certainly chime in under that post to say, I'm also having the same issue, but we don't want you replying on a post with a new issue because those are getting lost in the weeds of the replies under the top post. So if it's a new issue, please try to create a new post for that so that we can better manage that until we're able to change that process. So I also just wanted to let everybody know that we realize that the Microsoft Teams channels are not working out that great, and we are working on another process for issue escalation, but it's going to take us another week or so to get that rolled out. So bear with us, continue to report those things through the Microsoft Teams channel, but know that we are working on a new issue escalation process that will hopefully help you and all of our end users report in your issues, find answers to common issues under those categories. And then if your answer is not in that site under this new format, then it will send your email to the correct group of people on the ODE side to help you out, whether that be the resource coordination team, whether that be my team, whether that be the community case management liaison team, wherever it is, it will direct your question to the right group of people so that we can more effectively and efficiently respond to those. So better process coming, stick with us, continue to escalate those up through the Microsoft Teams channel, and again, try to create a new post if it's a new issue, not tag that underneath one because it might get lost in that. I did go back and look at the Q&A from last week, the questions that we didn't get to, and there was one question in there that I wanted to interject right here. It was around whether or not change champions should have a special role in Evergreen. No. The answer to that is no. You do not have a special role as a change champion or now agency support person. So reminder to everybody on the call, and for those that maybe weren't in last week's call, we've recoined the group of volunteers that's on this meeting. You're now all just being called agency support people. It's just a little bit easier than trying to keep track of the two different titles, and post deploy, you guys are all kind of fulfilling the same role of, acting as more of a gatekeeper or a funnel for collecting issues and reporting those up. So we've changed the terminology to agency support people, and agency support people, previously maybe known as a change champion, should not have a special dedicated role in Evergreen. Again, your the intent behind the role was always to be a point of contact for people at your agency to ask questions, report issues, and help deduplicate that so that those were not coming in the hundreds and maybe only coming in the dozens of reports, so that we can more efficiently and effectively respond to those, analyze those and respond to those. I also wanted to share a little bit of information. I know there's been a lot of questions coming in around assigned locations, assigned roles, whether your role has the right access or not. I know Mark addressed this on the Thursday call for those of you that were able to participate in the Thursday call a little bit. I think I also kind of reiterated some of it on the Friday call. So if anybody came to the provider call on Friday, you may have heard some of this, but we have been analyzing reports of these types of issues that have been coming in from end users from your agencies. So if you're saying I'm seeing client records that I'm not supposed to see, or I'm not assigned to all of the locations under my organization, or I don't think I have the right role, or I think my role doesn't have the right permission. We have been analyzing those questions and issues as they've been raised up. And I want to reassure everybody that the data did migrate exactly as it existed in EIS. We've confirmed this on multiple cases. The challenge is that EIS may not have been completely accurate. So if you're a waiver provider organization, for example, and you used to provide services to Leslie Miska, and you're no longer providing services to Leslie Miska, there's no active prior authorization for your location, the location under your organization. There was no automated way for those relationships, those assignments to end in EIS. So unless somebody told us, whether that be a community case manager that was assigned to the person, or you from your organization, or unless somebody reported that to my team, that assignment was never ended. So you did still have access to that person in EIS. It just wasn't as obvious to you because in EIS, you would have had to search for that person in order to see their data. Where in Evergreen, when you run queries or you run reports, those person records are now showing up on those lists for you. And you're like, we don't serve this person, or we haven't served this person in years or months or whatever it is, right? So we need to get that cleaned up. We are committed to getting that cleaned up. We want to get that cleaned up for you. But we need you to report that data to us because there's no real good way for us to know about that. We are going to try to do some querying of the data and trying to figure out if we can determine some of that on our own. But it would be a lot more straightforward if you're able to report that to us. So I know I've shared this on some of the other calls, but if your provider organization or community case management or a care coordination agency, and you feel like your but specifically providers, you feel like your staff are not assigned to all of the locations under your organization, they're not being able to access all of the locations under your organization, you can send an email to evergreen.dhhs. We do need to know what is your organization. So if you can give us your NPI and what location or locations your staff are not assigned to and should be. So NPI is +3 and or the name for those locations would be helpful. And then what staff are experiencing this. So if you have multiple staff that are not assigned to several of your locations. And if they're supposed to be assigned to all the locations, you don't need to give us every single individual location. You can just say this staff person should be assigned to all of our active locations, and then we'll get that cleaned up for you. So you can send those to evergreen.dhhs at maine.gov, but please include those details. And also, I think I mentioned this last week on some of the calls, Friday's call, and specifically, please be patient with us. This is very manual, and it will take a long time for us to get this cleaned up because we have hundreds, thousands of organizations that are going to be experiencing some of this, and it will take a while for us to get that all cleaned up. In addition to that, we've heard from several waiver provider organizations specifically that, and I think mostly from like a PCP data entry role perspective, that you don't have the right level of access. Again, I don't believe that to be true on the overall. I think what happened is the PCP data entry role access changed quite significantly from EIS to Evergreen, and maybe that just wasn't clearly articulated during your training sessions, but there are several changes to the access that the PCP data entry role has. And so your access is set up correctly, just different than EIS. And so it felt like maybe you weren't given all of the permissions that you're supposed to have. So for example, you no longer have access to view the whole PCP. You can navigate to the person forms and plans. You can navigate to the person-centered plan custom list page. You can see the PCPs listed on that list page. You can open the PCP, but when you come into the tab, you're going to get an access denied message on that PCP tab because you're no longer allowed access to view it. However, you can click on the SIP tab and you can see the service implementation plan and the details that you need from the PCP in order to complete your service implementation plan are displaying at the top of that SIP form for you. Another example is submitting safety device packets or submitting safety device requests for safety devices. That it generally, or not always, but in many cases, the provider organization will collect the forms and data that is needed in order to get approval of a safety device. That process should still continue. You should still use the request form and the approval forms and fill out the data. The challenge is that you do not have access to actually attach those forms to the safety device packet in Evergreen. You will need to submit those to your community case manager or your care coordinator so that they can add those forms attach those forms to the safety device packet and submit that. And the reason behind this is because the need for a safety device should be documented as part of the person-centered planning process. And the community case manager is the author of the community case manager or BI care coordinator is the author of the person-centered plan. So they're the ones that need to document that need in the PCP, in the needs section of the person-centered plan. And then they can create the safety device packet. They can obtain the forms from you that have all of the appropriate licensed professional signatures and the description of the devices and all that stuff. And they can attach that to the packet along with the PCP that includes the documented need. And then they can submit that forward for the community, for the committee review and approval. So there's just been some changes to some of the roles like that. That's just some examples. But in general, your roles were set up correctly. And I'm saying in general because I know the community case manager role has had a few challenges since we went live with not having all the permissions that they needed. But that is one of the things that we have tried to do since we went live is get some of those permissions added for the community case managers. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we get a little bit further down. But reportable event provider, provider authorization, and PCP data entry providers, you guys do have the correct permissions. It's just they may be different than what they were in EIS. And so you may be struggling to understand how some of those new processes work. And we certainly can talk through some of those if we need to further. We've also received at least one report of, and it was in the Q&A last week, of a duplicate person record, a duplicate client record. We did try very hard to avoid duplicate client records, but there every now and again there will be a duplicate client record. There's just some places where there's some manual intervention and there's really no way around it. Sometimes we're going to end up with duplicate client records, but we're going to try really hard to keep that minimized. And we did during migration as well. But if you feel that there's a duplicate client record, please feel free to report that to us as well, to the evergreen.dhhs@maine.gov email box. And then my team will analyze that and work to resolve that. So I'll also just share that when a duplicate client record occurs, it is a very manual process to merge those records. So it takes some time, but we are committed as well to resolving those issues as they come up. But so if you think that one of your clients' records is duplicated, please send that email to evergreen.dhhs@maine.gov. Tell us the multiple person IDs. So the Evergreen person ID for each of the records. And we will analyze and determine which record should be retained as the official record and which ones should be duplicated, considered duplicates. And we will mark the ones that are considered duplicates as such so that people will stop adding data to those ones, and they'll stop showing up in your search results. And then we'll have to manually move data from the duplicate records to the record that we're keeping. So that will be a responsibility of someone on my team. So again, it will take some time to get those cleaned up, but we will help get those cleaned up and merged. And there shouldn't be that many of them. But if somebody does believe they have one, please let us know about that. We also have some reports to run that can tell us if there are duplicates. So we are also aware of some that we are trying to remediate right now, a small number. There was also a question in the Q&A last week, or more of a statement about an issue with saving data. I'm bringing this up because I am not aware of any challenges with saving data. So I want to remind people, if you're editing a form or you're creating a form, you need to ensure that you're using your save buttons in order for the data to get committed to the database. So most forms, once you navigate into them, you'll just see a little pencil icon over each of the sections. And when you click on that pencil icon, it will open an additional pop-up window. And when you enter data into that pop-up window, it doesn't save to the database until you hit save or continue or whatever the button is that will, mostly it's going to say save, but every now and again it might say continue, that will then commit that data to the database. That saves it to the database. But some of the forms, like the person-centered plan, the service implementation plan, the comprehensive assessment, those are considered complex forms. And in order to edit those forms, you have to use the edit toggle in the upper left-hand corner, and you have to toggle that on. So the little button will look orange when you're in edit mode. And then you can page through the form and you can edit data. But in order for data that you're editing on that form, capturing or editing on that form to be saved or committed to the database, you need to hit the save or save and next buttons at the bottom of that page. If you're not using those save or save and next buttons and you're just paging with the arrow, it's not going to save your data and it will be lost. So that is very important to remember to do that. And I can say when I first started using the system, I forgot to do that a couple of times. So you will forget to do that a couple of times. But once you've lost a little bit of data, you'll remember to use your save and next buttons because it will be painful. It was painful for me. So I know from experience. But yeah, just in those forms in particular, CompassS, PCP, SIP, always look to the bottom of the page and hit save as many times as you want. You can hit that button as many times as you want, but definitely before you leave that page, make sure you've used the save or save and next button. The other item I wanted to give an update on or address is for community case management and care coordination agencies. We've received several questions about your case management billing reports. So in Evergreen, you should have the ability to run these reports yourself. However, when we went live, I did find a security issue with the note audit report, which is the report that you'll use to pull this data. So I turned it off. I turned that report off for everybody. So you do not have access to the report right now. So for the February data, I had my team pull that data and we will be sending you emailed reports for the month of February, but we hope to have this resolved so that you can pull your own March reports by the middle of April at the latest. So we will let you know as soon as that report's been turned on. I apologize for the delay in getting the February reports out to you, but those should get out this week. You should start seeing those. Maybe some of you even received them earlier today and or tomorrow, and we should get them all out by the hopefully by the middle of the week. Again, apologies for that. It's been a lot of competing priorities, but we were able to pull that data for you for February. I also wanted to give an update for reportable event providers that organizations and agency support people that are on the call that are overseeing reportable event provider roles or are reportable event provider roles yourself. The reportable events that are being reported as dangerous situation other, we are in testing that are being reported as hostage taking because you need it in other category. We are in testing for that other category. So we are hoping to be able to roll that out to you in the next couple of weeks. So fingers crossed that testing goes well, and that should be rolled out shortly for you so that you can stop using that workaround, but we will notify you as soon as it's been rolled out. The other piece for reportable event providers that I wanted to give an update on is around the provider follow-ups. So I did talk about this on Friday's call, I think, and we may have even talked about it last Monday briefly, but it was definitely in my emailed communication on Tuesday last week. We are finalizing that provider follow-up form now. I hope to be able to attach it to the emailed communication that will go out tomorrow. Or if not tomorrow, it will go out on Wednesday morning, but soon we'll be sending out the next emailed communication, and we hope to attach that provider follow-up form to that email and upload it into the help center. But I did let you guys know if you have a provider follow-up that needs to be reported, added to a reportable event that migrated, you can email us at evergreen.dhhs@maine.gov, but we will give you the paper form soon to be able to fill out for that. And then from a provider authorization role, I did want to give a couple of updates there. I saw that there was a question or a comment in the Q&A from last week about whether or not provider authorizations will be notified of new prior authorizations, or if there was an update to the prior authorization. So we do have an informational notification for prior authorizations, and it was turned on when we initially went live, but it was one of the notifications that was sending to all users of the system with that role. So we did turn it off. It has been turned off. But it's also minimally helpful to you. So once we turn it back on, all it has for data is the person's name. So you're still going to want to rely on that PA utilization report. That's where provider authorization users are going to get your data. You're going to want to go into the reports area and run that PA utilization report in order to see all of the prior authorizations that exist out there and any new ones that maybe get added or updated in there. And I know that there's been a request to add the hours per week to that report, and we are actively working to get that added. It's not in there yet, but we hope to have that added soon as well. I've got our report writer on that right now as one of the top priorities for reporting. So hopefully that will be there soon. Victoria, I see your hands up. Did you have a question or a comment around this?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, so you said that there is a notification, but it's temporarily turned off. Is that for when the authorization is approved, or is that for when it's generated? Because we're running into an issue where none of our authorizations are generating and we can't find out until over a week later.
Okay, great question. So that is for when it's approved. So that notification that got turned off is when it's approved. I did just learn that the PCP is not auto-generating the prior authorization. So we did escalate that as an urgent issue to the vendor. So hopefully that will be resolved very quickly. Um, and yeah, there's no notification that goes to you when it's generated, only when it's approved. But I will definitely keep you guys updated. That was a brand new issue that was urgently escalated today.
Yeah, I was the one who reported it today because we've submitted several or we thought we submitted several authorization requests, and then,
Yeah.
after a week of trying to get an answer, we learned that they never generated in the first place. So until that issue is resolved, should we be emailing HCBS waiver once we complete a PCP?
Emily, I'll let you chime in here if you're
What I
on
was
the.
gonna, yeah, what I was going to say was, we definitely are seeing them generated, and maybe that there's an issue with when there's a change to the plan versus an annual plan. I mean, there's still, I guess,
I'll chime in
maybe some
on that a little bit.
investigation.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'll chime in on that a little bit, Emily. So, just for clarity, the only PCPs that will generate new prior authorizations are initial or annual PCPs. So, when an initial PCP gets completed, it will auto-generate PAs. And when an annual PCP gets set to complete, it will auto-generate PAs for the new plan year. But if you make changes to the PCP in between the annuals, or the initial and the annual, and you do a revision of a change type, it's not going to generate new PAs. What you need to do as community case managers or care coordinators in that case is you need to make your edits in the service section, the waiver service section of the plan. And then you need to use the change in waiver services section of the PCP to describe what edits you made. And it does send a notification to the resource coordinators that there's been a change in the service if you revise it with the correct change reason. So you also need to revise it with a change reason of change in services and supports.
No, that's not working. The only ones that are generating right now, at least for us, and I think at least one other company, and I haven't, those are the only two that I've heard from. So I don't know if it's everyone or if it's just the two, like me and the other one. But the only ones that are generating are if we do, like you said, initial or annual, and we submit that classification or reclass packet. Once we submit the packet, it generates. But for a service change, nothing generates. And we did do it the way that you said.
So, okay, so it should not be attached to the packet at all. The PA generation should not be attached to the packet at all. Like it
Yeah.
should literally just, when you set the plan to complete, it should auto generate the PA. So I can definitely explore that a little bit further, Victoria. Um, and when you do the change with the change in services and supports, it's not gonna fix the PA. It's not gonna update the PAs or generate the new PAs, but it should be triggering the notification to the resource coordination team. So
It hasn't for any of the ones that we've done.
okay, we can definitely look into that a little bit further as well. But to Emily, I did see an example of an annual that did not auto-generate the PAs. At least Udaya told me that it didn't auto-generate the PAs, so I asked her to escalate a high priority because I think there may be a bug as well.
So I was just discussing earlier today this issue with waiver specialists and with Angela Faulkner, and we're putting together again some suggested guidance for case managers. So folks will see that soon in their emails. You don't have to remember to share this, but all that to say, folks may not know, some case managers may have figured this out, but if you were to go to look at forms and look for prior authorizations, you can see sort of like the shell, if you will, that's what I'm calling it, of what's been auto-generated when that's occurred. So if you have a plan that's in complete status and you're thinking, okay, there's authorizations that should be coming, you have a way to tell whether it's on its way, if you will. So if you see authorizations there that, again, they generally, you would see your own name because it came from the PCP that you assisted to create that form. But you wouldn't see sort of a start and an end date yet for that authorization because it's still pending review. So what we discussed was, again, if a case manager has a plan and complete status. They look in forms, they don't see any authorizations generated for review. That would be a great time to send an email to hcbs.waiver@maine.gov, which will ensure that we will go manually create those authorizations ourselves. There have been instances certainly where folks have thought, gee, it's been about a week and I haven't had authorizations yet. We've had a high volume, so it has been about that amount of time that's taken us sometimes to be able to respond to the PAs that have been generated for review. So just the fact that it's been, a little bit of time doesn't itself mean that there's been an issue that they haven't correctly generated from the PCP. But that's what I would suggest. Again, if the plan is in complete status, you expect that there will be PAs generated for review. Case managers can view authorizations generated from the PCP through forms. And if you don't see them, that's indication again to email hcbs.waiver@maine.gov. I'm sure there's data points I'm forgetting. Let me just quick check the Teams chat that I had earlier today. But we'll make sure again that we get this information out to all case management agencies.
Yeah, that'd be really important to know because that's not what we were told before. We were told before that we don't get to see them until they've been approved. So that's a really good change of information to share with everyone. But then you're also saying that change PCPs do not generate. Is that right?
Correct.
So we do need to be emailing HCBS waiver to let them know.
No, the system, if you do revision of the PCP as a change type and you select the change reason of change in services and supports, and you edit whatever you need, and then you need to fill out the change in waiver services section of the PCP, and then when you set it to complete, it will trigger a notification to the resource coordination team that you've revised the plan and there's a change in waiver services, and then they have to manually adjust the PA.
I'm curious if that's worked for anybody yet, because like I said, it doesn't work for us and it doesn't work for another agency that I heard from, and I haven't heard from anybody that it has worked for yet. I'm curious to the group, I guess, is there anybody that has worked for?
I didn't quite hear your question, but if you have a request about like volume of authorizations issued or anything like that, we can certainly respond to that either through Q&A or maybe in our next session. I don't know that I can't speak for Leslie, but I'm not sure whether, again, the intent of today was to have sort of a large group discussion about folks' sort of anecdotal experiences. So my fear, I think, a little bit is we certainly want to hear folks' questions and respond and provide information. But my fear, I think, a little bit is that we want to make sure, again, that we're providing the clearest information possible to the group as a whole. And sometimes when folks are just relying upon their best recollection, in my experience, it can cause more confusion. Definitely.
My point here is that it's not anecdotal, though. We have not had a single one work properly. Another agency has not had a single one work properly, and I haven't heard of a single agency that has had it work that way. And so I understand that the point is to provide information, but I don't think this information is accurate.
We'll certainly follow up on it, Victoria, and make sure that the notification is triggering to Emily's team. But I had not heard that the notification was not triggering to their team, so we can certainly take some examples. So if you can send your specific examples of, we'll need the person ID, the PCP form ID, which was a change type that you set to complete, and then we can take a look at that exact example and see if it triggered the notification properly and Emily's team received it. So if you have a couple of those examples, and if there are other people on the call that have a couple of those examples, if you want to send those to the evergreen.dhhs@maine.gov, those specific examples with those ID numbers, we'll certainly take those and analyze those a little bit further and make sure that that notification is triggering the way that it's supposed to.
So we certainly know that there's issues. None of us, I think, are trying to gloss over those. I just want to be clear, from the angle of having the benefit of seeing the big picture and all the aggregate information. There's hundreds, certainly probably thousands at this point of instances where things are working, where we are getting alerts and the PA query is providing us with accurate information. So I just don't want to, I want to acknowledge, of course, the issues, and we want to respond to them specifically, and we will. But I also want to make sure folks know that there's many, many instances of things that are working as they should, which is a good thing for Evergreen.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, and so just Victoria, I was just going to show again. So this was what Emily was talking about, is as a community case manager, you can navigate to the person record. You can go to the forms and plans page. This is again, the all forms list page. You're going to want to actually go over to your filter icon here and navigate to your prior authorization page. And even these, you'll see PAs that have this, if they start with the LTS, that means it was generated by Evergreen. Or if they don't have an alpha, a set of alpha characters in the beginning, then they were ones that got migrated. If they have EIS in the front, which I guess my test record doesn't have any that migrated from EIS, I was kind of hoping it did, but if they migrated from EIS, then they'll have the EIS acronym in the front. But these ones were all generated here inside of Evergreen. And you can actually, as a community case manager, you can actually view these even before they've been approved. So like as soon as the PCP auto generates them, they'll show up over there and you can see those. So you can open it up. It will give you like when it hasn't been approved and all the information is not there, you'll see there's like a lot of like empty fields, like total authorized units, total authorized costs, they're empty. But if you scroll down here, you can see what generated from the PCP, the lines that generated from the PCP. And then you can click in, you can see, actually, I'll go back there, I'm sorry. You can see that it says pending review, meaning that the resource coordination team has not yet done their review and approval of that. And you can even click in to see all the details for that specific line. So a lot of PAs are going to have two lines. They're going to be broken into the 2 6-month periods, but span the whole year of the plan. And so you can, again, expand all of this and you can see what was requested. And then you can tell over here, like this one hasn't been reviewed and approved because it's just got requested and there's nothing over in the authorized yet and there's no decision yet. But once the resource coordinator reviews this, they'll move all of the requested data over to the authorized data. And if they are going to approve it the way that it was requested, they would just leave it alone. If they need to make adjustments based on what was corrected, they have the ability to make those adjustments. And then once they've done that, then they add a decision down here of approve. And then you'll be able to see that decision of approve and who approved it. And then they would change this. They would set this to submit. And then it will have a status up here on the line that says pending MIMS processing, meaning it was approved today. It hasn't gone over in the file yet to be processed by the MIMS system. And then once it does get picked up by MIMS, it will have a status of processed by MIMS. And then back on this page here, on this previous screen, once it's been processed by MIMS, you'll see that this will update to, well, once the resource coordinator approves it, you'll see it will update to approved. And then once MIMS has processed it, you'll see that it updates to processed by MIMS. And then that means when it says processed by MIMS, that's available in MIMS for you to do your claims on. So you can review and monitor these as they're going through the process.
Yeah,
So,
I've seen a couple of those.
And
but
just
yeah,
to explain for folks, oh, sorry, this is a bit in the weeds, but so I've had an email from somebody saying like, why did you cancel? Why did you cancel this, Emily? And it's totally fine. I'm happy to explain. But instances of like a duplicate authorization, for example, right? Like if something had been entered manually, but then you also completed a PCP that generated an authorization for that same provider for that same time period, that would be a reason that we would be canceling a PA. It's not that, again, we don't agree that the person should have that service, but it's duplicative. So that question has come up. So I just wanted to explain that.
And Emily, can I add a little bit to that? So the reason that we're getting there are going to be a lot of these or not a lot, but there are a higher volume of these duplicates because since we've been having challenges with the revisions of PCPs, we've been telling you create an initial or do an annual to bypass the challenges that we've been having in the change type PCPs, which is auto generating duplicate PAs, because when we migrated, we already migrated your PAs in and they're already there. So when we're telling you to do a workaround of doing an initial or an annual, it's duplicating those PAs. And so Emily's team has to come in and they have to cancel the original one and approve your one that came in on your PCP so that that one stays tied to your PCP and moves forward with the PCP that you're working from. So right now, post deploy, you're probably going to see some canceled PAs, which is not general. Generally, you're not going to see that. That's not going to be a typical practice. But for right now, while we're doing some of these workarounds, you probably will see that from time to time. Sorry, Emily, I cut you off too. I think you were going to add something else. No. Okay. All right. So thank you, Victoria, for sharing that. I see Alyssa's hand is up. Alyssa, do you have a question or a comment around this same topic before we move on?
Yes, just very briefly. So if we did the change PCP because of a new SIP or a change in service, and we're not seeing the authorization, come up in Evergreen, we email the waiver.
Yeah, so with the change, you're not gonna see a new PA generated.
Yep.
So like if this was a migrated PCP, for example, and you had, I'm just gonna make a generic example here, right? So like you had a PCP in EIS, it had community supports service, waiver service in that EIS PCP. When we migrated, your EIS PCP migrated over, it's now an Evergreen PCP, and it has that community support service on it. And we also created a PA, a prior authorization for that community support service.
Mm-hmm.
And that PA that we created during migration is going to be one of the ones that just has a numeric value. It's not going to have an LTS in front, and it's not going to have EIS in front. It's just going to have a numeric value, but it exists already over under the prior authorization. If you need to make a change to that community support, so you want to increase the units, let's say you want to request more units.
Mm-hmm.
You'll go in and do a PCP revision. You'll revise the active PCP, the one that migrated over. You'll choose the change type of change in waiver service and change in service implementation plan. You'll select both of those change reasons because you want to increase the units on the service, and you also want the provider to update their service implementation plan to be consistent with the additional units. And then you'll change the waiver service. You'll find the waiver service in that PCP, and you'll add the additional hours per week that you want. And then you'll go into the SIP tab, and you'll find the SIP, the community support SIP, and you'll revise that so that it opens up a revision for the provider to fill out the SIP.
Yep.
And then once you've edited the waiver service and they've filled out the SIP, then in the waiver service change in waiver services section of the PCP, you'll say updated community support service, increased units to, X number of hours per week. And then you'll complete the PCP. That should, and I will confirm, because I know Victoria is concerned that it's not, but that should trigger a notification to the resource coordinators to say, Alyssa, I'm sorry, Alyssa, I don't know what organization you're with, but Alyssa's organization has, or Alyssa as the CCM has revised this PCP with a reason of change in services. Then the resource coordinator will come read the change in waiver services portion of the PCP, and then they will manually edit the PA that exists. So they'll edit that one that was created during cutover weekend. Does that make sense? So they'll increase the hours on the one that already exists.
Okay, so that wouldn't be, okay. So if we're looking in the prior auths and that's not happening within what amount of time?
Yeah. You will not see a new PA for those ones. You will only see new PAs if you create an initial PCP and you set that to complete, then you'll see new PAs that show up.
Okay.
Or if you revise it and it's a type of annual, then it's going to create all new annual PAs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just don't know how to verify that it's been done. But I have the same concerns that I don't think that ours are, like, in what period of time do we reach out to the waiver if it's not Like 10 days, 15 days, if we're not seeing that edited?
Yeah, so if you you will be able to see the original PA.
Yep.
Like your community supports PA, and if you're still not seeing it updated and you have some concerns, then yeah, I don't know if Emily is prepared to give a time frame right now, Alyssa, but certainly if after, 10 days or like a week or so you haven't seen that edit, then you might want to check in on that. I don't
Okay.
know if that's the right time period or not. I hate to like kind of distill it down, but I think, we're again, new system, everybody adjusting, including the resource coordination team, lots of issues that we've been trying to work through with you guys. So I think it is, probably taking a little bit of time to get all of those revisions made. So right now, probably, erring on the side of giving us as much time as you possibly can before you start panicking would be great. But we will certainly confirm that the notification is triggering. And if the notification is triggering, I can assure you that we will get to them. It's just a matter of a high volume of changes that we're trying to address right now.
Yeah, it's just trying to make sure our clients are getting their
Sure.
services, but thank you.
Understood. Completely appreciate that. Yeah. Brianna, did you also have a question around this?
I did, yeah, I posted in the Q&A too, but we've had some plans that we've had to start completely over, so not annual, but changing services. Would the provider that is not changing do a new SIP? So I know the new provider would have to do a SIP, but if the client already has a service authorized and we're just updating it.
That's a great question. Yeah, yeah. So like as a workaround, you've had to do a whole new initial
Mhm.
PCP because the way the data migrated was
And
not
just
great.
errors that we couldn't get past, yeah.
Yeah. So you're definitely gonna so when you create the initial PCP and you add the waiver services to the initial PCP, the system is gonna auto generate a service implementation plan form for each of your waiver services. So like to your example, some of those service providers might be new service providers and they would have had to fill out the new SIP anyway, but some of those providers might have been providers who already filled out a SIP in the one that migrated and is unusable. It does seem kind of unfair to ask them to fill the form out again, but the form does need to be filled out again by somebody attached to that new initial PCP. So what you could do, it's not ideal and I don't really encourage this, but what you could do is as the community case manager, you could print to PDF the SIP that was on the unusable PCP. So like you could open up that PCP, go to the SIP tab, expand all of the sections of that PCP and use the global print. So use control and the P key and save that as a PDF. And then as the community case manager, you can attach that to the SIP form that got auto created on your initial PCP. And that will allow you to set that SIP to plan implemented. And that will allow you to complete your PCP because you've satisfied the open SIP. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So hopefully we don't have to do that a lot because then when you attach that as a PDF, it's not, so like if that provider needs to revise that SIP, like down the road, they're not, those fields aren't going to be filled and they're not going to be able to see that SIP. They can't see that attached SIP. Only you as the community case manager can see that attached SIP. So at some point we want to get it back into the SIP form and somebody would have to do that. So maybe you could just do that temporarily. And then if they have to make a change to the SIP, you can ask them to populate it all again. Or maybe as the community case manager, you could copy and paste that into the form for them. But I know that's extra work for you guys too. So I don't want to ask you to do that either, but yeah, if you're having to use a workaround, that's probably the only good way for you to do that is to attach that SIP that was on the kind of broken migrated PCP. So I'm just going to, I think I found your comment, Brianna, so I'm just gonna move this to answered. Okay. So, moving on. Oh, and we're coming up on time. I'm so sorry. It's been some really good conversation, but I do want to share just a couple more updates. Hopefully I can get through these quickly here. And I do see there are several questions in the Q&A that I haven't gotten to again. But I promise we'll take those offline as well and get you responses to those and or at next week. So BMPs, the inability to create behavior management plans, that was escalated up as a priority issue. And I wanted to just let everybody know that that is also in testing right now. So hoping to get that resolved for you quickly. And then also wanted to remind everybody, I think I mentioned this on the Friday call for those of you that were at the Friday call, and I will also put this in the email communication that will go out, but safety device plans, and we talked about it already earlier, do need to be submitted by the community case manager or the care coordinator in the system. But I did open up as a PCP data entry role or a SIP provider, you can now see those. We opened up the permission so you can view them. You weren't able to view them before, but you can view those packets now. There may still be a challenge with you viewing the attachments on those packets. I am still working on that, but we will get that resolved just as quickly as possible. Service implementation plans. I know at last week's meeting, I shared with you access to the way that you can view what service implementation plans you need to fill out is by going to the SIP provider invitation report. I did want to just say that when we've been running that report and working to create the step-by-step instructions for you, we realized that there are several service implementation plans that are showing up on that form as in progress that technically shouldn't be showing up as in progress. And that was because in EIS, they were left without the lock status on them, but they were technically completed and they were attached to completed PCPs. And so they didn't migrate in the right completed status into Evergreen. Again, we are going to get that data cleaned up for you. My team is going to work to get that data manually cleaned up for you. We've pulled that data and we will be working on it. But I want all of the community case managers and care coordinators to know that we are going to be editing data in order to do that. So we will be going into completed PCPs and going to your SIP tab and setting those SIPs to plan implemented and then completing your PCP so that the SIP shows as completed and doesn't show, it falls off that report and it doesn't show up on that report for old historic migrated copies of PCPs. So just as a heads up, we're going to be working on that in the coming weeks. It will take us a little bit of time, but we will try to get that cleaned up for you. There was also a question about, there's been a couple of questions about editing SIPs. So I also just want to make sure everybody is aware of this. I'll add it in the communication that goes out this week. But as a SIP provider, as a PCP data entry provider, you do not have the ability to revise your own SIP. You do need to reach out to the community case manager or the BI care coordinator and tell them that you need to revise your SIP. That was intentional because again, those SIP revisions, I shared this on Friday as well, but those SIP revisions should be reviewed with the person and signatures should be recaptured from the person themselves to approve those changes in SIP. So as a PCP data entry provider, you do need to reach out to the community case manager or BI care coordinator when you need to make an edit to your SIP and request that the community case manager revise the PCP with a change type of change in service implementation plan. And then they will have to go into the SIP tab of the PCP and revise that specific SIP. So it creates the revised copy for you. And they'll have to notify you right now that they've done that because we had to turn those notifications off. Those were some of the notifications that were triggering to everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Victoria.
So I I was wondering, so we have to revise the PCP again if somebody needs to edit a SIP? Because I ran into that issue with PCP that I did recently where there were issues with the SIP and they had to go through Evergreen support to get it unlocked, because the only option for case managers is to accept the SIP.
So as a community case manager, yes, if a provider needs to revise their SIP, you need to go revise the PCP. So you would go find your active PCP, you would revise it as a change type, and you would select the change reason of change in service implementation plan. And then you would navigate to the SIP tab and revise the appropriate SIP, and that will create the copy for the provider to populate the changes. And then once they've done that, it will notify you that they've submitted it again. You can review it with the person, make sure that they approve the changes, and then you can set the SIP to approved again, and then you can set the PCP to complete.
And that's because we can't revise a plan that isn't active, right? So we'd have to go back to the previous version and revise that.
So when when you revise a PCP, the system is supposed to automatically set that to the active PCP. Like if the effective date, so you might revise a PCP in advance of the current active PCP expiring. So your original one is going to stay active, but once the effective date, start date comes around, the PCP that version should update to the active plan. That's broken right now. So we have an issue in there for that. It's a high priority issue that the vendor's working, but in general, the current, the PCP that has the effective date range for which today falls inside of will be your active plan. If you were like doing an annual plan, for example, and the provider completed their SIP, but there was problems with it, you won't be able to edit that until it becomes the active plan. But if it was like, so you have an annual and then you do a change at your 90-day, let's say, right? So you're as a community case manager, you're going to revise the PCP at least 4 times a year. You're going to do it for the first 3 90 days, and then you're going to do it for the annual, which will also include your 4th 90-day. So as a community case manager, you go in, you do your first change type for the 90-day revision. And after you've set that to complete, you hear from the service provider and they say, oh, I need to change the SIP. You can go back in and revise that change type is now your active plan. That will update to be your active plan once you set that to complete. And so then you can go and revise that one and let them fix their SIP.
Okay, what if there's an issue before you complete the plan? Because that was what happened when I was doing an annual PCP recently. The SIP was provided and it had misinformation in it.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't accept a SIP that had misinformation. So but I don't have the ability to reject a SIP or to kick it back. So what do we do in that case? Because I can't revise it if it's not the active plan.
Yeah, so your PCP is still in progress, but they've submitted the SIP. I need to follow up on that one. And I'll get back to you on that. I'm taking a note.
I just wanted to chime in. There's a reopen button on the status that I think case managers can see if the PCP is not done yet. That might work in Victoria's case.
On the SIP tab, you see a
Yes.
reopen?
Yep, under the SIP status, there's a reopen button. If the provider, hits submit for review or something, we could go and reopen it and say it's clerical edits or something like that if the plan's not effective and someone's still working on it.
Okay, yeah, I'll confirm, Megan. Maybe you guys have that and you're not supposed to have that. I'm not sure.
Oh.
But that will work. That will work. I'm not sure if you're supposed to have that, so I'll confirm that. But definitely I'll get you the definitive answer. That certainly is how you would do that.
If we're not supposed to have it, could we advocate to have it?
Yes, potentially, yes. But I'll definitely follow up on that for you guys and confirm that. I do realize we're 5 minutes past, so if people need to drop, please feel free to drop. We are recording this and I will share out the recording. But I do want to just quickly go through a couple of PCP things before I adjourn for the day for anybody that can stay on for a couple of extra minutes. So related to PCPs, we did, after last week's meeting, we did add some additional permissions for you. So you should now be able to close your PCPs. I know at last Monday's meeting, you were saying that you didn't have that ability. You should be able to close PCPs. I also heard that you weren't able to delete your goals. You should be able to delete your goals now. And I also heard that you didn't have the ability to edit the questions in the rights, supports, and modifications section. We also added those permissions back. So hopefully you guys are seeing that. You should be able to do all of those things in the PCP now. That being said, we have gotten a couple of new issues related, reported related to PCPs, which is unfortunate, but true. So I did want to share with you what are the known issues that were recently reported up related to the PCP. So one of them is related to capturing signatures. So it seems that on some or maybe all of your PCPs right now, I have not confirmed whether it's happening on all, but at least on some of your PCPs, it is allowing you to capture all of the signatures, but the completion requirements are not showing as met. And so it won't let you set your plan to complete because it's saying that you haven't met the signature requirements, even though you have. So I have escalated this as the very highest priority for our vendor. They are to be resolving that as immediately as possible. So we'll try to get that rolled out very quickly for you. In addition to that, we also made aware of, and I alluded to it just a minute ago, that the active status is not updating when the new plan date rolls around. So for example, you revise a plan for annual and the start date is April 1st. So your active plan is still the one that you revised from. It's not the one that you just completed because we're on March 25th. So that's still active through March 31st. But on April 1st, the system should automatically update the new completed PCP to your active PCP because now that's the effective start date is April 1st on that plan. It's not automatically updating to the new active plan based on the date. So there is also a very high priority, like the second highest priority issue is around that change. So our vendor is working those ones as quickly as possible. But that if you have a completed version of a plan in Evergreen that should be the active plan and is not showing as the active plan, that is creating a challenge for you right now, because if you need to revise from the current plan, you can't because it's showing the one with the old effective date as still as the active one. So hopefully you can hold those changes for a very short period of time until we can get that resolved. And if not, you're having to start those over, which I really don't want you to have to do because it makes more work for you and it makes more work for your resource coordination team as well. But you know, if something urgent comes up, that is your only workaround is doing another initial. So the other issue that I didn't address last week, this was brought up last week, but I didn't have a chance to bring it up, is we are aware that sometimes it's pretty rare, but sometimes migrated PCPs, when you open them, they're just showing like a blank white screen there. Something was corrupt with some, like a small handful of the PCPs that migrated over. So we are aware of that. We do have a fix in for that, and we are, that's in testing. So hopefully will also be rolled out soon. And then we got some additional questions from the 318 meeting that I didn't get to respond to around PCPs. So one was asking about PCPs with the wrong date and how to remedy that. And the only solution to that is to revise that PCP as an annual plan. or create a new initial, because you can't change the dates on a PCP change type. Like when you revise as a change type, it won't let you change the dates. It keeps the dates because it wants to believe that that's still the effective plan for that date range. So you, in order to change the dates on a PCP, you do have to revise it as an annual or an initial to update the dates. There was also a question around the agenda. We did talk about the agenda a little bit last time. You can print the agenda that has the standard prescribed agenda items plus any that you captured as additional items that the person wants to cover, and use that for your meeting. You are not required to use that agenda. There was a question about whether you are required to or not. As long as you're covering the prescribed topics, the standard topics that you need to cover, you don't have to use that agenda, but we would strongly encourage you to. It does have all of the ones that you are required to do, and it also pulls in the ones that you've documented in the PCP that the person wants to cover. So it's a nice document for you to use, but if you have your own, you don't have to use it. There was also a question about the 90-day review process. I was hoping to cover that today, but we did run out of time, so I will bring that one forward to next week, and how to do the 90-day review revision. And specifically, we'll talk about medication review dates, because you do need to make sure that the medical professional contacts on the person's record are up to date before you do your 90-day reviews, because it does require you to respond to the medication review dates. And in order to do that, it needs to be able to pull in a medical professional from the person contact list, a contact that's got a role of professional medical. At least one needs to be there so that you can select that in that section in order to set that to complete. But we can go through the whole 90-day review process if time permits. And then the last item that was in last week's that I didn't get to yet was around person attachments. We did have to shut those off for security concern. And those, so that's preventing you from being able to see the migrated BMS 99s, the migrated psychosocials, the migrated PDF versions of your PCPs and SIPs. We do intend to turn that back on. It will take a little bit longer for us to get that turned back on, a few more weeks anyway. So in the meantime, you do still need to rely on your read-only access to EIS if you need to see those. But I, again, want to assure you that the BMS 99 items were migrated into your, oh, sorry, those weren't, but some of the psychosocial stuff was migrated into your PCP. But if you need your BMS 99 items and or the rest of your psychosocial, you will need to go to EIS for those until we can get those turned back on. But we hope to have them turned on in a few more weeks here. Way past time, but again, I want to thank all of you guys for joining up. Apologies that I continue to do a lot of the talking, but I did want to address the questions that I didn't get to last week. I do see that we have about 30 issues in the Q&A. I've grabbed those out so that we can prepare to respond to those next week and or in this week's communication. But hi, Laura, it's nice to see you. But thank you guys so much. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday at 4 p.m. Actually, I will also just take a minute to say I will actually not be here next Monday at 4 p.m. So Lisa Merrill will lead next week's call at 4 p.m. She's back. For those of you that know that she was out for a period of time, she's back this week and getting up to speed, and will be prepared to take over for me next Monday. With that, I'll let you guys all get back to your regularly scheduled program, which hopefully is the end of your day and dinner. But thank you guys so much. Take care. Look for my communication coming out in either tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest for this week. Thank you.